Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives, and I apologize in advance. I'm going to be pausing this vlog at some point, at least in like 45 minutes or so, because my cousin's going to be coming home and I'm in the kitchen right now and the front door's over there, so I'm going to be pausing that, so again, sorry in advance. But today we're going to be discussing the 7th movie to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe / the first film of Phase 2 of the MCU, Iron Man 3. And I suppose I could talk about my history, about what I was expecting when I first went into this film, and I guess the best thing I can say is that with the Avengers coming out, I kind of thought that the next phase would be kind of bigger, a step up. You can say, because with the Avengers film, there was a lot of build up and a lot of payoff that I think really kind of went into it, and so after the Avengers, I was just super pumped. I thought, oh man, that was great. I just thought that was cool. I want to see more of that. And so when Iron Man 3 was announced, I thought, oh, it's going to be a stepping stone for more films, right? They're going to be building up to more stuff. And it's not what we got, but at the same time, it wasn't what we got. At the same time, it was still an Iron Man film. And while my opinions of the first two films are different, my overall thoughts were they're fun films, and I think they're still cool to watch. So, with that said, is the third Iron Man film kind of lead into that? Well, let's talk about our plot summary first. And again, another apology in advance. I just did a 20-minute take that I think, while I did have my interruptions, I thought was pretty good. So I might be rushing through this summary a bit in the beginning until I get back to where I left off. So apologies in advance if I feel like I'm rushing through it or I'm being snippy. So sorry. But anyway, the film actually opens up in 1999 in Bern, Switzerland, in a science convention. As we open up with the younger Tony Stark, like pre-character development Tony Stark, as we see him just kind of partying and smoozing, and we see him trying to woo this woman named Maya, who is a scientist there. It's New Year's Eve. Tony, of course, tries to get her upstairs for her to explain her opinion, which is also still a pretense for her to try and bed her. But as they're going upstairs, he and his party are halted by a rather scraggly man named Aldrich Killian, who says he represents the something called the Advanced Idea Mechanics, or AIM. And they've been monitoring Tony since year 2 in MIT, and Aldrich wants to approach Tony about working together with him and his think tank, which is what AIM is. And so Tony says that he's interested in what he says. He looks forward to working with him, and he'll meet him on the roof in 5 minutes. And yeah, this is just a ploy to get rid of him as he immediately goes to meet with Maya in their hotel room, and he actually is interested in her ideas, as we see her explaining like a bio something that's pretty much supposed to be like it maps out and can hack the human genome. However, it's still got faults, as we see when Happy messes with a ficus that she's been experimenting on the stuff. It goes boom. As such, they kind of have a fun night and the next day Tony kind of leaves her a card saying, it's like, who I am, with a little equation on the back of the card for her. But in the meantime, for the rest of the night, we see Aldrich still on the roof, and that's the last we see of him for now. We learn more later about what happened on that roof. But we now cut to present day as we see Tony in his basement, and ever since the Avengers, Tony's kind of developed a bit of PTSD from the event. Pretty much what's kind of happening with him is that he's suffering anxiety attacks. He is triggered whenever anyone mentions New York. He has flashbacks to when he threw the missile into space, and unfortunately he's kind of developed a bit of insomnia. As such, for 3 days, because he hasn't slept in 72 hours, he's been kind of tinkering around with some new stuff and new suits, and one of them is a Mark 42 suit. How this one works, as well as some other suits we see later, is that he's implanted within himself microtransmitters. I think that's what they're called. Yep, microtransmitters. That pretty much can allow him to summon the suit in pieces and put it on him. which is a cool idea, but the Mark 42 is clearly still not battle ready. As one, it falls apart rather easily when enough force supplied, and the weapons we see are still need some work. As that, after Tony tries it out, he just kind of goes upstairs to turn on the TV, and it's here we're introduced to kind of sort of the film's main villain, the Mandarin. As we see that the Mandarin is essentially what we're introduced to is that the Mandarin is a terrorist, plotting bombings throughout America, announcing his intentions to the world via live television, and just kind of saying how much that he's going to pretty much destroy America little by little. As such, with this new rising threat, in order to gain more public sympathy, they rebrand the War Machine suit as a new suit entirely called the Iron Patriot, which is just the War Machine suit painted red, white, and blue. And yeah, it's stupid. Even in universe, they think it's stupid, and Tony just mocks Rhodey relentlessly about it. And I admit, the Iron Patriot thing was something that was done in the comics during something called the Dark Reign when Norman Osborn was the head of the Avengers, and even in that thing, the Iron Patriot was a publicity stunt to get people on his side. So yeah, it was stupid. It was stupid then. It's stupid now. It's just kind of, but it's funny. It's funny what they do. So, but Tony wants to get in on what's going on with the Mandarin, and while Rhodey does share information about the Mandarin, he's not exactly willing to tell Tony a lot because he knows that Tony's on edge, and this isn't a superhero thing. It's just regular public affairs and a terrorist. And while that's a big thing, he thinks that they can handle it. But of the information he does give Tony, he does explain that that the Mandarin is responsible for 9 bombings, only 3 of which the public is aware about. And a strange thing about all the bombings is that no one can ID where the bomb and what's used because there's no shrapnel that they can left behind at any of the sites. So that's something that's to keep in mind. But while they're having this little conversation, we cut to Pepper and Happy, and Pepper is still the CEO of Stark Industries, and we see her meeting with Aldrich Killian in the present day, who's managed to clean up rather well, and he wants to approach Pepper about working with him in the think tank for AIM, as he introduces something called Extremis. Essentially, it's some kind of bioweapon thing that can be introduced into your body that can essentially enhance you, give you extra normal abilities and so forth. And they want to and they can even make it part of you genetically because there's an open slot in the brain that they can plug it into. And he wants to approach Pepper because Tony said no, and she's the new head of Stark Industries, so he thinks that she might be open to it, but Pepper says, no, I'm not interested, Pepper says, no, I'm not interested, so yeah, that kind of gets thrown out so yeah, I think she pretty much tells him she doesn't want anything to do with his little thing. However, Happy is a little suspicious of this guy and his bodyguard, so he tells Tony he's going to follow him because he's kind of been spying on Pepper on Tony's behalf. And in the meantime, Pepper comes home to the Stark mansion because she's moved in now because she and Tony are dating, and she finds Tony downstairs kind of working out on their date night and having already eaten and even sent up his Mark 42 armor in his place because with the enhancements on it, he's managed to create a neural link via a little transmitter he has behind his ear that allows him to control the armor even when he's not inside it. While she's a little outraged about this, Tony does open up to her, saying that ever since Avengers, he felt like he's just been feeling weak. He's seen more worlds and he's seen all these bigger stuff, and but in the end of the day, he's still just a guy in a suit. He feels like he's nothing. As such, he's been part of the reason why he's been tinkering so much is because he wants to protect what's closest to him, and in this case, it's Pepper. And Pepper's one of those people that's closest to him. As such, she is understanding to this, but even she has her limits. As that night, when she and Tony are sleeping, he starts having flashbacks to New York, and because of the neural link to his suit, it reacts by going up to Pepper and kind of holding her down, and causing Tony needing to shut it down. In the meantime, though, Happy still followed Killian's bodyguard to this little Chinese theater where the guy's meeting with this junkie at first, it looks like, who says he's been regulating something. And so the bodyguard gives him a briefcase full of something, all these little pins that are something. And so after he does that, Happy intentionally knocks into the guy and makes him drop the briefcase, and he grabs something that fell out of it. And after that, the bodyguard approaches them, and Happy pretty much tells him that he's had, but which caused a fight between them. Though what's strange about the bodyguard is that when Happy actually manages to hurt him, the injuries he has start glowing and actually manage to heal. However, during the fight, the junkie managed to take one of the hits that the bodyguard gave him and sniffs it up, but it causes him to start glowing, and as he starts screaming what the hell's going on, the bodyguard jumps for safety while Happy finds cover behind a stand, and the guy explodes, pretty much taking out the whole theater, and Happy does manage to survive, but he's heavily injured and he's put in a coma. And the bodyguard, we see that he's also fine, as we see him starting to glow too, only instead of exploding, his body's actually healing and reforming from the explosion. As we see him take some dog tags and walk off. That apparently, as such, Happy's now in a coma, and at this point with that, Tony kind of declares war on the Mandarin. As he walks out of the hospital, he goes on live TV and calls the Mandarin a coward, that he's willing to that he's going to kill him. This is the last straw, and to show how unafraid he is, he's giving the Mandarin his home address, which is a stupid decision. Even Tony realizes it, like when he gets home, as he apparently puts the mansion on lockdown. But in the meantime, he does decide to do a bit of research on the bombing sites for all the bombing sites, and he manages to kind of relegate them to where the Mandarins hit. Though upon examination of a virtual version of the Chinese theater site, he does manage to find the dog tags, and he kind of cross-references everything, all the sites with the Mandarin hit with cross-reference some sites the Mandarin hit with these strange high levels of some kind of radiation, and he managed to find. However, one of the sites that he finds is one of the sites that he finds is this little town called. Sorry, gonna find it. Rose Hill, Tennessee. And however, what's strange about this place is that apparently there were 2 soldiers that were living there, and this place was hit before the Mandarin revealed himself. So it seems a little out of the time frame. But Tony thinks it's worth investigating, so he has Jarvis set up a flight plan. But at that point, someone knocks on his door, and it turns out it's Maya. As such, Tony goes to meet her, wanting to know what the heck's going on, and she apparently wants to head Tony out before reporters come in. And at that point, Pepper comes in with bags packed, with Tony threatening the Mandarin. She wants to get the heck out of Dodge, which I think makes sense. Threaten a terrorist, haul ass as fast as you can. But as Tony, and Maya are talking, we see some helicopters flying in that aren't newscopters, and we see that they're obviously there on behalf of the Mandarin. As we see one of Killian's bodyguards driving the helicopter. Killian's affiliated with the Mandarin. Spoiler, but we later learn that he is still affiliated with the Mandarin, as we see him after this event he gets a call from the bodyguard confirming everything, and we see him helping set up a shoot for the Mandarin to broadcast on TV. But sorry, checking on the dog. Anyway, so pretty much the helicopters just open fire on Tony's mansion and cause the whole thing to start falling apart. And as it's falling apart, Tony uses neurotransmitters to call the Mark 42 suit and puts it on Pepper to protect her from everything. He tells Pepper to get Maya out of the mansion, and while she is hesitant to leave Tony, she does comply and get Maya out of there. And once she's safe, Tony calls the Mark 42 back to him and starts using it to try and shoot down the choppers. And while he's able to take down 2, the third one manages to get the last shot in and causes the whole mansion to just pretty much fall off of the cliffside. As such, Tony's still caught inside it, and unfortunately he's trapped under rubble, and he's trying to get out, but he can't get any leverage to get himself out, so Jarvis tells him to hold his breath, and Jarvis attaches the glove from the suit and allows him to pull him, and use it to grab his hand and pull him out, allowing Tony to fly away. Unfortunately, Tony's still waterlogged, so he does pass out, and by the time he wakes up, and when he wakes up, it turns out that that he's still been flying in the suit, and Jarvis is alerting him that they're at about 5% power, and the suit crashes. Tony immediately wants to get out, and he wants to know where the heck they are, and they say that they're in so I'm going to look it up again. Rose Hill, Tennessee, which was their last known flight coordinates where all this went down. And of course, Tony's like, no, we got to get back there. We got to check on Pepper and everything. But unfortunately, with the attack on the mansion, the damage to the suit, and just the low power, Jarvis is malfunctioning, and so at this point, Tony's kind of stranded as the suit kind of goes dead. As such, Tony decides that he needs to find a way to get everything working, and he drags the suit to a car shop, a workshop. You know what I mean. Before he goes there, he goes to a phone booth and calls Pepper and manages to get a message through to his helmets, which Pepper managed to get because she found a helmet in the wreckage, and I'm guessing he sent it to all his helmets and just hoped that she would find it. And it's pretty much the message saying, I'm sorry about this, I shouldn't have brought you into it, but I need to, but there's something I still need to do, so sorry, something I still need to do, so I'm not going to be coming home yet. And as such, Pepper decides that she wants to talk to Maya, and Maya confirms that the reason she came here is because she suspects her boss, which is, Killian, is working with the Mandarin. As such, Tony manages to, anyway, back with Tony, he brings a suit to the workshop, and he meets the kid who kind of lives there. And this kid is named Harley, and he's kind of a tinkerer like Tony, though doesn't have the same resources as him. And so he and Tony kind of form a small friendship, and Tony managed to get his cooperation by giving him a little flair that he can use on bullies. But in the meantime, Tony and him go out to get a sandwich, and Tony decides that he should at least continue his investigation. And so he goes to the place where the bombing occurred in the town, and pretty much the story is that the guy who apparently organized the bomb was a soldier, and that he apparently went crazy and built a bomb and blew himself and 5 other people up. However, when Tony checks the blast site, he finds that with the way that everything blew up, there's shadows for people who got caught in the radiation and got killed. And while there were 6 people dead, counting the bomber, he only counts 5 shadows. And while people do say that it's because that the shadows represent people going to heaven, and since he blew up the bomb, he went to hell, so he doesn't get a shadow. Tony's still thinking logically and thinks that there's still something going on. As such, he looks up this soldier's next of kin, and it turns out he has a mother that lives in town. And so Tony goes to investigate. Though on the way there, he runs into a woman who seems to kind of have a bit of scarring on half of her face. As such, Tony eventually manages to find her in a bar after looking for her enough. And so when he goes in to see her, apparently she's expecting someone as she hands Tony a file on this guy saying he was MIA about what he was doing, etc. And so when Tony looks this over, he tells her, Ma'am, I don't think your son is a murderer. I think someone used him as a weapon. And so when the woman realizes this, wait, what? And she then realizes, you didn't call me here, did you? And so the woman that Tony ran into before arrests him and says she's with the feds. And the sheriff of this town is there and starts thinking, what the hell are you doing this for? And she keeps telling us public business above your pay grade. And well, then raise it. And then the lady pretty much confer. And we soon learn that this lady actually works with Killian, as you see her hands go up as she just kind of goes to town on the whole bar, tearing it up, looking for the file. And when Tony was arrested, he was able to gesture for the lady to throw the file away. And so Tony managed to grab the file and get out of there, though he still got handcuffs on. And so he managed to get out, and we see the bodyguard is there, and we see the bodyguard is there, and they're both extremist charged, I suppose you could say. And so Tony has to find a way to get out of there, and he keeps trying to outmaneuver these guys, and of course, being handcuffed, he's kind of at a handicap. With Harley's help, he is able to outmaneuver these guys, and even managed to go into a diner where the woman follows, and Tony manages to, and the extremists thankfully makes their bodies kind of superheated, and so Tony managed to hold the lady in a chokehold with his cuffs, and the heat that her body's generating manages to melt the cuffs enough so that he can break them off. After that, Tony distracts her enough so that as he goes in the back of the kitchen, throws in some dog tags that he found, in a microwave, turns on the gas, and gets a lighter, and even gets a lighter to try and distract her. As he goes out the back, as the lady comes up, and she sees all this going on, the place explodes, and she's supposedly killed. As the last thing we see of her, she's on some power lines tangled up. But, of course, the bodyguard is there, and he uses his powers to melt the supports for a water tower that comes falling down, and Tony is still thankfully saved, though he is still under some rubble. I think Harley helps him out. I don't know, I don't think so. Actually, no, he didn't. But at this point, the bodyguard grabs Harley and pulls him out, and he pretty much threatens Tony, saying that he'll hurt he doesn't say it this exact way, but he does imply that if Tony doesn't give him the file, he's going to kill the kid. Though Harley managed to get away by using the flare that Tony gave him, and it turns out Tony was still doing some tinkering as he managed to get a repulsor ready, and he just blasts the guy, sending him back. And it looks like it kills it, and it just knocks him out, but unfortunately, still without the suit, Tony has to take it off. And so Tony goes over to his contract form and takes his car keys. As such, he leaves the armor with the kid and tells tells Harley to stay on the phone because he might need him, and then he wants him to try and charge up the suit. Though Harley wants to come with Tony, but though Tony says, "No, we're done here. You're done here. I'm gone." And it's kind of a funny little exchange as the kid tries to get Tony to feel guilty about leaving him, but Tony just says, "No, I'm done." In the meantime, Rhodey is trying to track down. Rhodey has been tasked with trying to track down where the Mandarin is. As during the latest broadcast, he apparently shot an accountant for the Roxxon Oil Corporation. And so they have Rhodey in his Iron Patriot armor trying to find possible locations, and he comes across 2 duds. So at the first dud, he gets a call from Tony, and apparently reports of Tony are that he died. And so when he hears Tony calling him, he's glad he's alive. And so Tony says and it turns out the Iron Patriot and it turns out that the Iron Patriot rebranding was kind of thanks to AIM. So Rhodey still has an account with them. And Tony, when looking through the files, found the MIA file, and when he turned it over, it turns out it said AIM, so that meant that they're involved with these bombings, in the Mandarin. As such, with Rhodey's help, he gets his password, he gets his handle, I suppose, he gets his username and his password, which is War Machine 68 and War Machine Rocks, all caps and Rock spelled with an X. But unfortunately, he doesn't have the power to access the file, so he goes to this. Hold on, I wrote it down. Sorry. Oh yeah, he goes to a memorial hall that has some light news broadcasting going on. And it's where we get our Stan Lee cameo, as we see a beauty pageant, and Stan Lee, so one of the people there, is one of the judges. And so Tony managed to get into a news van, and the guy that owns the van is a Tony Stark fanboy, so he's willing to help him get some extra power to access the AIM files. And so when Tony manages to find the stuff on the Extremis, and he soon learns that the bombs are and so he soon learns that there are actually no bombs, it's people. As we see them working, and we see that these people are pretty much just soldiers that have been wounded in battle, are just can't go in anymore. Like the lady he met earlier apparently lost her entire left arm, and so they're pretty much using it as test subjects for the Extremis. And as we see the footage of them being extracted with it, and with the Extremis in, we see that all wounds are healed and that body parts are growing back. But it turns out, but we see that the Extremis is actually diluted from Maya's original project, as we see that, unfortunately, it still has the problem of people blowing up, as one of the test subjects blows up. As such, Tony thinks that Maya and Killian apparently saw this as an opportunity and sold these human bombs to the Mandarin, and so he is now more determined to find them. And so he calls Harley again, wants to know where the Mandarin is. And Harley states that apparently Harley they managed to get Jarvis back online, and so Harley and Jarvis pretty much confirm that the Mandarin is in Miami, which Tony finds a little strange, but ultimately does decide to go there. Though he creates some weapons with some help of Harley. And by that I mean Harley encouraged him, saying, "You're a mechanic, right? Well, can't you just build something?" And so Tony just goes and gets as much supplies as he can from a store and turns them into little weapons. In the meantime, though, Rhodey goes to another place that could be a possible place for the Mandarin. We see a bunch of women there that are being held captive and they're sewing, and so they all run away when Rhodey realizes the Mandarin isn't there, as they feel they're safe. But one, it turns out, is one of the soldiers that was infused with Extremis, as she goes in there and uses their powers to pretty much throw Tony to the ground and cause the suit to be paralyzed. And so they say they want the Iron Patriot armor, though Rhodey isn't willing to give it up so easily, so they just take him and the armor back to the Mandarin's mansion. In the meantime, Tony manages to find the mansion thanks to the relay that Harley and Jarvis gave him, and he manages to get in, knocking through all the guards with his weapons until he eventually arrives at the Mandarin's room, only to find that the Mandarin isn't all he's cracked up to be, as it turns out that instead of being this terrorist with a solemn attitude, who's willing to sacrifice. Hold on a sec. Fireworks, sorry, I'm on edge. I need to keep in mind of everything, and my dog's right there. Good, he didn't hear any of that. Anyway, So yeah, it turns out the Mandarin isn't this terrorist who callously sacrifices people's lives because in order to make a point. He's an actor who was apparently just in the gutter, on drugs, just down on his luck and everything. And apparently AIM approached him and wanted to sign him up for a job. Gave him everything he wanted: more drugs, a better room, just these privileges, women, a boat, just pretty much everything he's wanted. And yeah, it turns out that in reality, Killian is the real man behind the strings. He's been organizing the Mandarin, and as we later learn, it turns out that the bombs that they've been having are actually just misfires. Like, as we've seen before, there is a margin of error for the extremists, as if the person's body doesn't want to accept it, then it will overheat and they'll go boom. As such, to kind of cover his ass, he created a villain to pretty much take credit for all of these. In this case, the Mandarin. He just kind of brushes off he just kind of brushes everything off, and he says that part of his plan is that he wants to control the supply and demand of all this stuff, as he says that he's going to get someone in power that can kind of keep everything rolling. And that's part of where the Iron Patriot armor comes in, as he overheats his suit and causes it to open up and get Rhodey out of there. Though Rhodey kind of ultimately has to surrender when we see that, yeah, Aldrich has also been experimenting on himself, as he uses the extremist, as he apparently spews fire, and pretty much, yeah, Rhodey is knocked to the ground and just kind of, and Rhodey's, yeah, just kind of held at gunpoint as they take the Iron Patriot armor and leave. And in the meantime, Tony's also captured and knocked out by Aldrich, and we see him now strapped to a bed frame with Maya looking over them. As it turns out that when Pepper brought Maya away and they talked, it turns out that Aldrich tracked him down, and it turns out that Maya was actually in on this the whole time and was not actually planning to betray Aldrich, as the reason she went to Tony is because she wanted to bring him in on this, make him part of the inner circle, as it were. Which Aldrich the first isn't happy with, though Maya says that now they've got some leverage on him with Pepper. As such, Aldrich comes in and explains that night back on 1999 New Year's Eve, when Tony didn't show up, he kind of learned a new lesson: desperation. And he did briefly consider jumping off the building, just thinking he was nothing, until he learned that being anonymous is probably a good thing, as when you're anonymous, then no one pays attention to you, it's fine, and if you have a face that you can control, or give someone a villain, or that's someone they can hate, then you're pretty much golden. And you can pretty much just organize everything behind the scenes, and no one will look your way. They'll be instead looking at the face you projected. However, once again, of course, they still need Tony's help with the extremists, because it's still the overheating problem. They need to try and fix it. Tony, of course, doesn't want to help until they show Pepper. And it turns out that way they try and motivate Tony, so they've been injecting Pepper with the extremists, and she's at the point where her body doesn't know whether to accept the extremists or just give up. But either way, the process is slow and very painful, and so they're pretty much telling Tony, "You can help us, or she's most likely going to die." And so Aldrich starts trying to torture Tony, but at that point Maya is starting to think maybe that's enough, though it kind of does come a little out of nowhere. As she says and she tells him, "No, you're not going to do this," and she threatens to kill herself, saying that about this, and Aldrich tries talking her down a bit, but she says, no, it's like, "No, knock it off, no, you can't doing this," to which point he just shoots her, and says, "Hey, look at that, there's a new opening, think about it." In the meantime, though, we see that Aldrich has his bodyguard try on the Iron Patriot armor, and it flies off. In the meantime, Tony, while still being strapped down, managed to hear a beeping from a watch that he borrowed from Harley. It was a little Dora the Explorer watch that Harley got from his sister. And it starts beeping, and apparently and so Tony tells the bodyguard, his guards that they should that if they don't back off, then they're probably just going to die. And so he keeps gesturing with his hands, but nothing keeps happening, and so he's saying, "You'll pay now. And at first they think he's joking, only it turns out that, yeah, it's the Mark 42. They managed to get it up and running enough to fly back to Tony, and so he used it to and they managed to get a hand and and a leg, and so he managed to break free from his bed frame and starts pretty much knocking down guards, grabbing each gun, and eventually Harley manages to open up the doors to his auto shop, or his car garage, I'm just gonna say, and the rest of the suit flies out of there and goes to Tony as he pretty much just goes and wrecks all the guards, and eventually he just keeps knocking down all the guards until only there's one left, and the last guy just kind of throws his hands like, you know what, no, I quit, I never like working these guys anyway, they're weird, and he just walks out. And so Tony gets his suit, and so Tony goes out and grabs his mask and uses it, he slaps it on, now back in his full Iron Man regalia. But the word of his escape got out, so Rhodey used that as a means to use that distraction to get away from him, escape himself, and knock out one of the guards and get their phone. As such, he calls Tony, and Tony sees the Iron Patriot armor flying off, and he asks, tell me you're in there, and he says, no, I'm not. And as such, Tony and him go to the Mandarin and want to know what the heck Aldrich is planning, and he says he doesn't know that much, but he knows that it involves the vice president and a boat. They of course have no idea what he's talking about, but whatever it is, they need to find out what. But whatever it is, they need to get the Iron Patriot armor, and so Tony remembers the Mandarin. I'm sorry, I don't remember his real name, mentioning that he had a boat, and so they pretty much commandeer that, and they call the vice president. The vice president. In the meantime, the bodyguard in the Iron Patriot armor goes to meet the president on Air Force One, and of course they think it's Rhodey. And so he goes in and so they let him in, and they just kind of let him in. In the meantime, Rhodey and Tony manage to call the vice president, and wanting to know how he's involved, and they say you're going to be pulled in. They manage to get through to him, and they manage to convince him who they are, and say that he's going to be involved in something with the Mandarin, and it might involve the president. You might need to do something, and so he says, okay. And says, okay, the president's on Air Force One. I can get sent out of command, and we can get a bunch of people out there to take care of it. Only the instant he hangs up, he doesn't order anything and just goes to his daughter, who apparently is missing a leg. And yeah, he's in on it too. He's actually working with the Mandarin. Why? I don't know. Maybe he wants something on the extremis maybe he wants to give the extremis to his daughter so that she can grow her leg. We don't know his motivation. That might be his motivation. I don't know. But bottom line, yeah, he's in bed with Aldrich. As such, Tony decide. As such, once the appropriate time hits, the bodyguard pretty much throws a bunch of security personnel into a closet, and goes into the main room of Air Force One and just starts blasting everybody there except for the president, who he reveals his face to. And then the next thing you see is the Iron Patriot armor flying out of Air Force One, while the bodyguard is still on there. Apparently in the chaos, a hole got blown in Air Force One, and there are still people on board. But as he's doing that, we see the Iron Man fly in, and they get into a nice little they get into a fight, and it's actually pretty heated, and the guy managed to damage the armor somewhat, but with the hole in Air Force One, people are still flying out, and the plane is still falling apart, and so Tony, as one last effort, blasts him with his chest laser, and hole in his chest is a lot harder. I'm guessing a hole in his chest is a lot harder to heal than an amputated arm, so the guy's now dead. And so Tony goes out to Air Force One and manages to find 13 people, and he manages to save them by grabbing at least 4 and sending a slight electrical charge through their arms so that they can grab the other people and so they can get a soft landing into a bay. Though after he saves them, he flies out into traffic, and it turns out that Tony wasn't even in the armor the whole time, as he was still back on the boat. However, he does tell Jarvis that he wants to set up this party protocol, and so they still want to figure out what exactly Aldrich is planning. And soon we see Aldrich on this oil tanker that's owned by Roxxon. As we see him kind of monologuing to Pepper about how he had another reason for keeping her around, as he's got the hots for her. But we soon see the Iron Patriot armor fly in, and it turns out that the person that was inside it was the president. As such, Aldrich kind of reveals to him about how this big oil tanker, how the oil tanker once spilled about a few years back, and how no big wigs got fined for it because he pulled strings, and so the president's like, "Is that why you're killing me?" It's like, "Oh no, I just needed a good story to I just need a good reason for people to think I wanted to kill you. Wanted to kill you because I got a guy higher up, and once I kill you, he gets your job." And yeah, like I said, his big goal is to control the supply and demand for war. Supply the weapons to the guy, create the weapons to supply the weapons the extremist extremist soldiers to the new president, in this case the vice president, while the Mandarin acts as the guy with the bombs, and it's just kind of a constant flow. Just a constant flow, just a big thing to cover his ass. It's dumb. It's dumb. But either way, Tony and Rhodey manage to sneak on to the manage to find the president and manage to find where they're keeping Pepper. And so Tony and Rhodey manage to get in, though it doesn't take them long before they get caught. So they immediately start as such. They both just kind of start a shootout inside. They just kind of start a big giant shootout throughout the whole place. And as everything's going to hell in a handbasket, they seem a bit outnumbered, especially when Tony can't use a gun for crap, which I think kind of makes sense. He's probably just used the repulsors, and I'm guessing he can use a gun enough to shoot it. But Rhodey's the one with formal training here. But in the midst of all the chaos, we see what this party protocol is. As we see all the Iron Man suits that Tony was working on, which are apparently hidden in a sub-basement, all flying out, all being operated by Jarvis, and he pretty much tells him to hone in on any extremist soldiers as they're here as well. And it just leads to an all-out big explosion brawl, and even though Tony's not in any of them, it is so cool seeing all these Iron Man armor, all these armor variants just wrecking things up. You see one with drills on its hands that causes a walkway to burst up. You see one that's just for charging and bursting through things. You see ones that you see bigger ones, smaller ones, just blasting everything up and causing explosions. It's just great. And of course, Tony calls in a suit of armor for him to use personally. And though when Rhodey asks for one, he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's key to me. Tough break." Which I know Tony is just saying that to get under Rhodey's skin since he gave the Mark 42 to Pepper earlier in the film, so whatever. But amidst all the chaos, he does manage to find Pepper, and unfortunately the room she was in collapsed, so she's under some debris. And so when Pepper sees Tony again, they try to embrace and they try to hold hands, only for Aldrich to come bursting out because again, Extremis is flowing through him. And he starts trying to, as he tries to kill Tony inside his armor. However, Tony does manage to blast him off with either with the armor he has or another suit of armor, just enough to get him distracted so that Tony can eject out of his armor as the floor ultimately caves in. Tony's trying to jump after Pepper. Things are just getting even more crazy. Tony tries getting another suit, but he gets blasted aside. But amidst all the chaos, unfortunately, Pepper seems to fall 20 feet into this giant fire. And so at that point, Aldrich appears, and so it just leads to an all-out brawl between both of them as Tony keeps jumping from armor to armor, trying to get him off, and Aldrich just keeps tearing them all apart, just bit by bit by bit, until it looks like that Tony doesn't have any more. And so Aldrich says that you didn't deserve... And so in the midst of all it, Aldrich out there on the roof and says, "Look at that, you're on the roof." He throws him down on a walkway and says, "You didn't deserve her. I was going to make her perfect." And Tony says, "You're right, I didn't deserve her, but she was already perfect." But they suddenly see in the distance that another suit's coming in, and it turns out once again it's the Mark 42. It's still damaged from all the crap it's gone throughout the movie, but still in one piece, but still salvageable. And so Tony tries calling in to wear it, but it again falls apart when it hits something, so it just kind of tumbles all over the place. Aldrich still thinks that he's going to win, he's going to try and blast Tony, but Tony manages to get another plan in mind as he manages to throw the armor onto Aldrich as it starts covering him, and just before the face mask goes on, Tony says, "Jarvis, set the Mark 42 to self-destruct," and so just the mask flies on Aldrich, the whole thing just blows up, and Tony thinks he gets away. But unfortunately, even that doesn't kill Aldrich, as you see him crawling out of the fire, and he looks burned but not out, and he just looks at Tony and says, "You wanted the Mandarin, you wanted someone to kill, well here I am, Tony, there is no one else, I'm the Mandarin." And I know that's what they were supposed to be, they were planning to get with, I think that's what they were trying to go for. Still kind of failed, because I'll get to that later. Before he can kill Tony, something smacks him aside, and it turns out it's Pepper, who it turns out survived her fall, and because of the extremis flowing through her veins, she survived the fire, so she's perfectly fine. And Tony's just glad to see her. But however, it's still short because unfortunately, Aldrich is still in one piece, and he still is kind of pissed. Although there's still one more suit of armor coming in, and unfortunately, when Tony tries to call Jarvis off, it turns out that the little earpiece fell off, so he can't call the armor off because it's been been told to go after any extremist soldiers, and since Pepper is currently has extremists flowing through her, that means that she's a target. But before Tony can get the earpiece and call it all off, Pepper manages to actually shoryuken her fist right through the armor, rips off the arm and puts it on her own, and she manages to throw a piece of shrapnel right into Aldrich's chest, and then she blasts him, causing him to just go boom, and fully overheating him and destroying him. As such, after all that's done, Pepper kind of has a moment to breathe, where she says, "Oh my God, that was so violent. No, I understand why you kind of want to keep the armor. I won't complain about it again." And so Tony keeps saying, no, it's fine. It's not the armor, it's me. It's not the armor, it's not the armor. It's just you I need, and I will fix this. And he says that he kind of doesn't want any more distractions, and so he says that he has a way of keeping his focus more centered, and so he tells Jarvis to institute something called the Clean Slate as a Christmas present, because this whole thing took place around Christmas. And all remaining armor sets that are still there all blow up. Pretty much, it's pretty much Tony's way of trying to show that she's the most important thing in his life, and that these things are that he can push these things aside for now. As such, we get the resolution of the film as we see the Mandarin we get to see the Vice President and the Mandarin each getting arrested, and of course Aldrich is dead, so he's not going anywhere. We see Happy start to wake up as we see him reacting to. I forgot what it was called. I know the show too. I haven't seen it, but I know what it's called. It was a British show. Downton Abbey. I think that was what it was. Sorry if I got it wrong, but yeah, he apparently likes the show. And so Tony does manage to get Pepper some surgery to remove the extremis from her, but he decided that as long as he was doing that, he decided he was going to do one more thing. And we see him under the knife as he's on a doctor's table, and we see them removing removing the arc reactor from his chest and using the electromagnet to pretty much pull all the remaining shrapnel from out of his chest, pretty much healing Tony, pretty much getting rid of everything, pretty much eliminating the need for the reactor in his chest at all. As such, the film's final scenes are we see Harley going back to his little garage, and it turns out Tony sent him some new tech that he can use to go nuts with, as well as a potato gun Mark II, because he threatened Tony with a potato gun in the beginning of the film. And we see Tony going to the remains of his mansion and throwing the arc reactor into the sea while grabbing whatever stuff that's still there, and just driving away as he narrates that you can take away all this stuff, but there's one thing they can never take away, and that he's Iron Man. And so the film ends with the after credits scenes. We learn who Tony's been narrating this all to, and it turns out he's been kind of having a little venting session with Bruce Banner, and it turns out that Bruce is not a therapist. He's a researcher. He's a researcher. He's not trained for this sort of thing. So apparently he fell asleep very, very early in the story, and so he's trying to tell Tony that this is something he's not tasked with this is something he doesn't normally do, but Tony starts going off into another tirade, which causes Bruce to just kind of groan. But yeah, and that's kind of where the film ends. So overall, what did I think of Iron Man 3? It's alright. And that's kind of its biggest thing. It's just alright, if you ask me. Not great, but alright. Like, the plot is structured fairly well, with enough pacing and some mystery that I think makes it work, and I think makes it interesting to watch. Tony Stark is still kind of a great central character, as we see him dealing with the fallout from Avengers. He's having some PTSD, and with the reveal that there's bigger things in the universe than just him, that there are aliens, gods, all these other dimensions. He's freaking out. He's realistically, and he starts kind of questioning himself. Now, I suppose and so we kind of see him trying to do that, and we see that kind of fallout happening. It's kind of cool seeing him and Pepper growing closer, and I admit the idea of all these multiple suits is cool, and it's still got some fun action, but I do think the film has its fair share of problems. First problem, of course, is a problem that kind of consists through these films: the villains. First off, let's talk about the Mandarin. The Mandarin is probably one of the most infamous Marvel villains in the MCU. And that's kind of because just how he was implemented. Now, and I'm going to come at this from 2 points of view: from a comic fan's from a fan of Iron Man, and from a fan and just kind of a fan of these, and just a fan of the MCU. Now, first off, if you're familiar with Iron Man, then you know the Mandarin was a big deal in the comics. He was kind of like he was Iron Man's arch enemy. Iron Man was all about technology and self-made man. The Mandarin was the head of these organization called the Ten Rings, and he was like a master magician, very powerful, very threatening. He was a dude you didn't want to screw with. He was a guy that could match Iron Man in a lot of areas. And so when you had this film, and so when you actually kind of see him in this film, and you think and kind of thinking, oh, he's the villain, this is gonna be cool. It's only cool, only to be revealed that he's just some ass who's just paid to be an actor by the real big bad. It's like a giant F you. Like, oh, you wanted this big, powerful villain who runs a terrorist organization, has magic powers? Well, you didn't get that. You got this asshole who apparently does drugs and is just an actor. Yeah, that's dumb. That's dumb. And even if you aren't a fan of Iron Man, it's just so lame. Because prior to the reveal, there is some cool build-up. There's not much to him, but like with Whiplash and Iron Man 2, with what you do get of him, it does look cool. Like, he actually seems threatening, he seems kind of calm to mirror, like death doesn't bother him, he's willing to sacrifice lives, he callously sacrifices others, or who he thinks are beneath him. He holds a man at gunpoint and says that he can be saved if the president calls him, and even when the president does call him, he still shoots the guy. He's so calm to mirror, and it does kind of and he feels so real. Like, this isn't like one of those big-time supervillains that you see in these films. Like, he's not the Ironmonger, he's not Loki, he's not Whiplash. He's just a terrorist. A guy with a few guns and a crazy ideology, and it makes you legitimately afraid of him because it feels so real. And then you learn that he was really just a patsy, the front guy for the real villain, who it turns out is just another corporate scumbag, and it's just like, no, it's not even funny either. There's no dignity to the role. Like, he was played by Ben Kingsley, and oh god, he's so pathetic when you see him, when you learn that he's not the Mandarin. And it's just, oh god, it's just so lame. And I know you can say, well, wasn't Aldrich the Mandarin? Well, let's go to him as the villain. He's not that good either. Now, to be fair, he's kind of like Justin Hammer. Actually, no, scratch that, to be fair. He's like Justin Hammer if Justin Hammer was slightly more competent. And that's not a compliment. Because I didn't like Justin Hammer. He was a weenie. And this guy's that same weenie personality. Like, he's got the arrogant, like, oh, I was just this business, or you could get in on this too. It's like, I hope to be better. It's like, I want to keep you alive, and oh, she was perfect. No! It's like, I want to control the supply and demand. It's just, no! He's just a corporate dumbass. And he's not threatened, and the only time he's threatening is when he's actually a supervillain. But you already know who the guy is. He doesn't, even when he starts doing all the cool supervillain crap, I don't care about him. He's just Justin Hammer with with the ability to shoot fire from his hands. It's just, I don't like him. There's nothing about him I care about. Yeah, he sacrificed so many lives, but it's just basically the whole corporate ideology of, oh, well, it's all in the name of business. That's all. It's like, we don't have to worry about safety precautions. I created these soldiers that I can sell to the vice president who's in my pocket. Oh, I created a guy that uses the defects, yada, 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 blah, 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 blah. Whatever. The guy's lame. Even when he tries to look threatening later, when his clothes get burned off in the whole climax thing and you see the dragon tattoos, this guy is not the Mandarin. He may, I could kind of buy it for a sec in maybe when he said, like when he came out of the rubble and you see him glowing and he's saying, you wanted the Mandarin? Well, here I am. I'm the Mandarin. He did kind of look threatening there, but no. He has the power, but I already know who's behind it. Unlike Whiplash, who you kind of left it a mystery what kind of guy he was, except for the brief bits you got of him, but even then you knew he was an intimidating guy. This guy is a weenie. A weenie, a smarter weenie than Justin Hammer, who knows how to play people, but still a weenie. And that is a problem with the film. That is a problem. I don't like him. His entire motivation is dumb too. Like, he did all this because Tony didn't meet him on a roof all those years ago that Tony blew him off. Okay, well, sucks. Sorry, but that one thing is what caused all this. That Tony is responsible because of his earlier days, yada yada. Yeah, no. I'm sorry, but no. Guy's a lame villain, don't like him. Moving on. I think another problem, I suppose, could be kind of a lack of Iron Man. Like, other films kind of didn't have that too, but they knew that in an Iron Man film, you're supposed to have, at least for the action, you're supposed to have Iron Man. Unfortunately, because of how this film is structured, we're trying to get Tony out of the armor, trying to show the man behind the armor, which I understand that's what they're trying to do, but it's just that when you got a film called Iron Man 3, you kind of want Iron Man. And I know you could say, well, he is Iron Man. He doesn't need the suit to be a hero, yada, yada, yada. Well, yeah, I guess you can say it's the man under the armor who's Iron Man, and the suit's just there. But the suit's kind of what helps. He's called Iron Man, not super rich guy in a nice suit who happens to have all this fancy schmancy technology, man. It's Iron Man. And I'm not saying this to deter Tony's story. Tony's story is fine. I'll get to that when I start talking back to the compliments of the film. But it's just that when you have a film called Iron Man, I kind of would like more Iron Man in the films. And again, this might just be my own personal preference. Just might be me. If you're okay with that, fine. More power to you. This is just my personal opinion. And I suppose other faults can be, I guess the PTSD thing is supposed to be reacting to Tony's fears, but honestly, I think the PTSD thing is more realistic, and considering the event that Tony went through, of course he'd be having all this stuff. It's just that I feel like it's just not resolved in this film. And I guess you can say they're setting it up for later films to get to build on, and it kind of is. But for what we have, it really kind of feels more like an obstacle. I know it's supposed to feed into the whole Iron Man Tony feels weak thing, but it kind of feels like that would be a weakness. That's kind of a side effect of the PTSD. Tony, and I don't know if it's, and it's not. I don't think it's resolved by the end of the film. It's not really acknowledged. It's just kind of there to be a detriment, but I don't know if it's really wrapped up or not. It just kind of feels like it's there to help react, and it's cool, and it's nice, and makes sense. It's just that it feels like that. I suppose you could say it's tapping into Tony's fear of, it's like I'm nothing without, like I'm just a guy in a suit, so there's nothing to me, so whatever. But I don't know. I feel like it should have gotten more resolution to that. Like we could have gotten more for that. On top of that, the kid, I understand why he was there to help Tony, but he's kind of there in the back. He's kind of just there to help aid Tony. And I suppose it's supposed to be to get the kids more interested. Like he's kind of the target audience ideal sort of thing. But otherwise, I don't really see much point. Otherwise, he was just kind of, I felt he wasn't bad. He wasn't annoying. I thought the kid was fine in the film. I just felt like they could have done more with. I just felt like that, and I guess you know what? Forget that. Scratch that. He did his job, did it well, and they didn't have him in the movie too much to make him annoying. So, and the kid playing him, and the actor, and the kid they got to play him to play Harley is fine. So I'll let it slide. And apparently I've heard that that kid's apparently supposed to be the new Iron Man. So I'll put his name in the list of possible options in the future. But yeah, yeah, I guess my biggest problems with the film are the villain, kind of a lack of Iron Man when you kind of would like him to be there, and just kind of some lack of resolution in some areas. And I suppose you could also say having Tony lose the shrapnel in his heart, because that's kind of a big defining thing with Tony Stark. Just that kind of tragic, like he's got death so close to his heart. And it did kind of annoy me when I was a kid, or when I was younger and I saw the film, so I suppose... And I kind of guess that gets me a little, but otherwise, it's still Iron Man, and I suppose, but I guess that kind of does go into part of what I think is good about this film. First off, the arc with Tony. Well, I may not think it's as great as the self-destruction arc in Iron Man 2, or just Tony getting to the hero point in Iron Man 1. I think it's still fine enough. Tony questioning whether Iron Man is the suit or the guy in the suit. And I suppose that, again, that can feed back into why Tony Stark wasn't in the suit. Still kind of complains, because, again, you call him Iron Man. Where's the Iron Man? But at the same time, the movie does show more of Tony's capabilities. I feel like we should have had more moments of Tony questioning himself, like he's getting more afraid seeing the And again, I feel like the panic attacks and PTSD would kind of make sense for Avengers. Like that stuff keeps coming in, and it's overwhelming to him. And I suppose that you could say that the moments where he had the anxiety attacks were meant to be moments where he felt that he couldn't do it or he was not doing well. But I think personally that I feel like they could have done a better job with it, I guess. But for what we have here, we do see Tony being very agile, being creative in these situations when he doesn't have the suit. When he's captured, when he's in Tennessee and he's being chased by the extremist soldiers, he manages to get his way out of it, get out of his cuffs, and even manage to take one out using conventional means, and even manage to create weapons to handle Mandarin's guards while he's getting in. And even then, he's fine, and he's even willing to charge head first in to save Pepper, even though he doesn't have a suit. The suit, he gets creative with how he takes them down. Even the climax doesn't have him in his Iron Man suit fighting the bad guy. It's just him jumping between suits, getting knocked out of quite a few, and Pepper's the one that delivers the final blow. So I guess the idea is that I think the idea of him pulling out the shrapnel is supposed to be like the final thing. Like, he doesn't need that reactor to be Iron Man. Like, it's him. It's always just been him. He's always been Iron Man. The suit is for him. Like, the suit may be there, but as long as he's there, there's always going to be an Iron Man that he can make more and still get creative. And I like that, at least. I do actually kind of like that reaffirmation, though at the very same time, I think you could still say that Tony would still had that. And I suppose you could say it's just him trying to get his confidence back because of all this stuff. Because, again, Iron Man 1 and 2 showed he was still creative even when in these situations. But again, PTSD, I don't know. I just felt like the lesson could have been better. But it was still cool seeing Tony be creative. The acting, for the most part, is fine. Is fine. The action, I think, is still nice. And again, the story does have some nice pacing to it. We still get some nice character interactions, some nice moments between Tony and Pepper, Tony and Rhodey, all that nice stuff. And I do kind of like the build-up to how things are going. And even if the villain's plot is dumb, which, yeah, it is dumb. He's, again, controlling supply and demand. That's just, ugh. I still kind of like seeing how things progress. And the final action scene is still one of the best things. It's still one of the best scenes in the movie. Seeing all these different Iron Man suits of different functions just going around battling extremist soldiers, each one doing a different thing. That is so cool. You can't deny that. It's just that, and again, and you did have some good jokes, and again, there is still some nice big mystery, and there is some nice mystery elements here and there, but I just guess, as a whole, but as a whole, the film isn't bad. It's not bad. But I personally just think it's alright. And I think it's alright because it has good action. The acting is still good. We got some nice character interaction. The plot moves rather well enough. It's just that the villains are dumb. There's some lack of Iron Man. Again, you can say that kind of feeds into the story arc with Tony and him trying to overcome not needing the suit anymore, not having the suit. And there's still this whole, and you could easily still say that, and there are some, and again, what was the third thing? Lack of Iron Man. Oh yeah, and I feel like the PTSD thing and the whole I'm not Iron Man without the suit thing could have been handled better, if you ask me. But for what we got, I think this film is just alright. And that's all I think it is, just alright. Not bad, but if you want me to rank the Iron Man films up to this point, I'd say that the first film was the best, that it set everything up, flowed naturally, all the characters felt real, and it just felt like a really good, fun action superhero movie. The second film, still fun, but a bit cluttered and kind of trying to jam too much into with too little. And the third film is just alright. So you got very good to just alright. And and that's ultimately just and that's just kind of it. Just, yeah. Overall, I just think Iron Man 3 is alright. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. You can explain to me, if you disagree with me, please explain in the comments why you think the film is better than how I'm describing it. But I just ask that you don't be a dick about it and just express your opinion. Because that's why I'm doing these vlogs, to share my opinions. I don't want to make you think that I'm against you or anything. I'm just here to share thoughts, and I implore you to share your own. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say then. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in next week as we look at what many kind of consider the low point for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as we take a look at the second film in the Thor series, Thor: The Dark World.